Hypnosis works, transforming the mind.
Hi there, I'm Hendrik Baird, a practicing non-medical hypnotherapist currently based in Pretoria, South Africa. I'm always curious to learn more about hypnosis, and so I thought, what better way to learn than to chat with other hypnotherapists to gain some insights into what they do and how they work. So join me as we explore the fascinating world of the mind and of hypnosis. We're sitting outside here at the beautiful Solar Oasis. It's a lovely day. We're sitting outside at the table, and with me is Tom Budge. Tom, thank you very much for joining me here today.
Thank you for the invite. It's lovely being here.
Thank you for driving out all this way.
All of like about 5 kilometers or something.
So, first of all, your impression of where we are. You've just been taken on a tour.
I have been. This is just such an amazing place and such fantastic energy, and I love the landscaping architecture of it all and the way it all hangs together. And I hated fake grass until today, and now all of a sudden I'm in love with it, because when you stick fake grass on the wall, it makes a big difference.
It's quite different.
I'm kind of thinking about it as a sound deadener for a studio.
In fact, might work quite well.
It could, eh?
Yeah, better than egg boxes.
It might be.
So, Tom, you're quite the influential hypnotist in this country. You're quite well known. How did you get into all of this malarkey?
You know, I was I've always been in the world of IT, and that was where I've sort of started a business, forged a career, and that's very much logic, reason, programming. Everything's meticulous. They say it's one of the jobs on this planet where it demands absolute accuracy, because when you're programming a computer, if you get a semicolon in the wrong place, the thing just doesn't work. So it's stressful, and I wasn't into all of this kind of new age, high-fangled kind of belief systems of a new age hocus pocus. That's how I sort of felt about it. Certainly not, because I grew up as a Jehovah's Witness, which is one of those sort of like serious administrative religions. I can only really describe it as that. It's sort of a scorecard, and you have to tick the boxes, and the boxes get inordinately more complex as you go down the list until they're like super exponentially difficult. And if you can tick the last box, then you have your place in heaven, kind of thing. And so when I sort of got squeezed out of that, for various reasons, it was like done with religion, done and dusted, don't want to do any of that again. And so New Age spirituality was sort of like the fairies and the gnomes in the garden, and it didn't sort of work with me. But for some reason, one Saturday I was busy, I had a programming deadline, and I needed to get this job done, and worked up on a Saturday until about 1 o'clock. Usually got in my car, drove home out to the property here where I am at Western Centurion, and used to go down the highway, and that was it. But this day I meandered. I don't know why I meandered, but I meandered down Oxford Road past Marist Brothers College, and there was a fair happening at Marist Brothers College, and it was an esoteric fair. And I thought, let me just go and see what cranky shit this is all about. So I pulled in and went inside, and there were palm readers and all sorts of things, and it was like, okay, this is quite interesting. And somebody read my palm, and somebody else did tarot cards, and I gave them some money, and it was like, that's interesting. They're pretty accurate, but I'm sure there's some explanation behind this. Anyway, the story is that after having wandered through the school hall where all these little stalls were, I went through the back door, and they've got a big amphitheater at the back of the school hall. And there was one lone guy doing a lecture there. And behind that was where the tuck shop was, and I wanted to go and get something to drink. And so I didn't want to cut across his parade, literally. And so I just sort of hung back a little bit and listened to him. And it was Terry Winchester. And Terry was talking about something out of the Course in Miracles. I didn't know that at the time. But what he was saying kind of intrigued me. He says, all of your problems can be sorted in a flash. because all of your problems are created in your mind. Nothing's real. The only reality that there is you, and who is you really. And I was like, wow, that's another way of looking at the world. And I was quite intrigued. Anyway, he paused in his lecture. I walked across, got a Coke, came back, sat down, listened to the rest of his lecture, and it was like, well, I'd like to talk to this guy. And he had little A4 pieces of paper with his details on, and then, like you cut the little fringe at the bottom with your tear or phone number. I plucked one of those off, stuck it in my wallet, and came home. And that little phone number stayed with me, and I never had the guts to throw that away. It was about literally 18 months after that, and then I took it out and I put it in the cubby hole of the car, or in where the console of the car is, and this little piece of paper stayed with me. One day I had to have the car serviced, so I took this piece of paper out because I didn't want it to get vacuumed up, and I put it in my pocket, got a lift to the office. At the office I found the piece of paper and I looked at it, and I remember sitting there for about a half an hour seeing this piece of paper. Picked up the phone, gave Terry a call, said to him, by the way, it's nearly 2 years ago you were at Marriage Brothers. I was very intrigued by what you were doing. Can I come and chat to you sometime? He said, sure, no problem. I have a Tuesday or Thursday evening get-together every second Tuesday or every Tuesday. Why don't you come and join us? We meet at like 7. We talk more of the same stuff. So I went, and it was fascinating, and that's where I understood that what he was really talking about was Course in Miracles. But then he was also around that offering a workshop, a self-help workshop. And it was a series of about 4 or 5 weekends that sort of led to the pinnacle weekend. And I just joined. And there was some fee involved, but anyway, I enjoyed it. I mean, basically, you sort of, somewhere along, there was a little bit of a talk, and then you lay down on the ground, covered yourself with a blanket, and then Terry just started to speak. And I found myself going into this like la-la land. And it was beautiful, and what he was saying seemed to work, and there were little finger techniques, little clicks that he would use, and things that sort of led to that final weekend. And that final weekend I came away from that rather emotional and kind of transformed in a sense. Later on I realized, this was many years later, I realized that this was, I think it's the De Silva method of hypnosis, which was almost like a franchise thing out of the United States, a format that worked quite well. Got some books that I researched on De Silva afterwards, and it was quite nice, sort of gone out of fashion a little bit. And at Terry's place there was sort of like, it was an extension to his home, and there were some toilets and things there, but one day there was a bigger group than usual, and those toilets were occupied. So Terry said, just go through the passage you'll see in my own home, there's the toilet there. And on the way back from there were all these certificates hanging on the wall. And that was the first time that I saw the word hypnotherapy. And I thought, wow, that's intriguing. And I went to Terry and I said to him, basically what you're doing is this hypnotherapy, because I see all your certificates on the wall. He says, by and large it is. It's kind of hypno-meditation in a way. I've sort of cobbled the two together. And I said to him, would you consider teaching this? Do you offer courses on the technique itself? Because I like the idea of it. He says, no. I'm not good at teaching this. I just kind of knit off my own ball of wool. I do what I do. He says, the people that you need to contact is a couple that live down in Cape Town. And they are about the best teachers that you can find in South Africa at the time, who will teach you hypnotherapy. So I said, do you know who they are? And I said, yeah, it's Malcolm and Krista. And Malcolm and Krista were living in town, and in the little library at Meadowbrook or Meadowdale, they were running hypnotherapy courses. And that was coincidental because the business, the IT business, had just opened up a Cape Town office, and I was sort of heading that business. So I was traveling every Tuesday morning, first flight out to Cape Town, overnight Wednesday, come back late night flight on Wednesday, and I'd spend those 2 days in the office in Cape Town. So I soon met up with Malcolm and Krista, and they said, yes, come and join our courses, but our courses are in the weekend. So then I just shifted my program down to Thursday, Friday, spent the weekend there, got my flight back late Sunday night, and that's how I did my hypnotherapy training with them. And it so happened that Malcolm and I really became good, close friends. We just sort of hit it off, sort of more or less of an age, and sort of had similar kind of mindset and belief systems around life. And then he ran the courses. Then he said, because him and Krista would come up to Joburg periodically, they'd hire a hall, and then they started to get some kind of course going in Joburg. And I said to them, well, I don't mind facilitating for you a little bit if you wanted. And they said that would be nice, but they could manage, and so they ran the Joburg courses for a bit. And then after a little while, Malcolm contracted asbestosis. He, somewhere in life, had been doing some repair work, maintenance work, and some asbestos got into his lungs, and he got lung cancer, and he started to get quite ill. And he was really, really trying to put the courses together and deliver them, but he was out of breath, and there was an irritating cough that he had developed, and he was just, he'd lost his spark. And as Malcolm became a little bit more indisposed and then eventually died, Krista said, I don't know that I can do this on my own. And I said, well, look, I don't mind helping out. As a favor for a friend, gladly help out. So I was running some of the Joburg courses for them, and I'd fly down to Cape Town and help her out with the Cape Town courses. And that just grew. And de facto, without me even wanting to get involved, I found myself teaching a lot for SAI in those days, because that was the beginnings of the Institute. The SAI was founded by Malcolm and Krista. And de facto, I took over, and then I was running all of Joburg and the half of Cape Town, because it was easier than for Krista to fly up every now and then. She did from time to time. And then Krista said, don't I want to buy the Institute? But I was still involved with a computer company, and there was just no way that I could do that at the time. So I declined. And that's when another guy and Claudia Klein brought it together. He was a lawyer, and she brought SAI together. And I stayed on for a little while teaching. But I could see that they wanted to sort of take their business and own their business, rightly so. And I stepped aside and stepped away from teaching. About 2005, I wanted to get out of the computer business. You don't want to be a 60-year-old with a whole bunch of propeller heads doing IT. It's a career where it takes a lot of hard work, and it's shifting quicksand. Because what you learned 4 years ago is absolutely irrelevant today. You have to spend at least a quarter of your time relearning everything, because it's an industry that changes.
Constantly, yes.
Constantly. So the deal was, when we founded the business, that by about 50 we'd start to think about getting out of the business, and by about 55, no later than 60, we'd be retired out of the business entirely. But there were big changes in the IT business, because there had been the IT boom and the big IT crash, and companies had gone under, and investors had lost lots of money. And so by the time I was about to sell my equity in the business, there was no one ready to buy. And we had an institutional investor in the form of Nedbank as part of that business. And so it was really difficult getting the business sold. So I sort of slowly pulled my way out of the business. So I was taking Thursday and Friday, since I didn't have to go to Cape Town anymore. I was taking Thursday and Friday, and I was starting to run the hypnotherapy thing. And it was starting to pick up good word of mouth referrals. I cannot impress upon new hypnotherapists the power of word of mouth. You've got to establish that client base, and you've got to your clients need to trust you enough to be able to come back and refer others, because it's very personal. This is much more personal than doing massages or reflexology or anything like that. You're working with people's minds, you're working with their lives, their belief systems, and when they trust you, they'll come back again and again. And so I was doing the Thursday, Friday, Saturday kind of thing with the hypnotherapy, and those days just became bigger and more fully booked. I believed that I couldn't get people out to Protea Ranch, way on the western outskirts of Centurion.
All the way up on the mountain.
On the mountain to see the sage on the hill, you know. I took rooms in the Walida pharmacy And then that little space, I outgrew that space. It was just too small. It was sort of 2 meters by 2 meters. It was working in a box, and it was hot, and there's no way you can have an air conditioner in that space, because with trance work it just doesn't work. It's too noisy. And working in a retail space, there were lots of people making jokes, and there's all the hana outside, and I learned all the tricks of how to get suggestions in people's minds to ignore all of that. Utilization at its best. And then space opened up in the wellness centre in Bryanston on the other side of the ring road. Dr. Richard Brink owned the building, and he had an open space, and it was mainly for medical people. And I went to him and I said, I'm interested in this space. It was a nice corner office, nice windows in the back corner of the building, very quiet. I said, I'm very interested in the space, but I'm not a medical professional. Would you allow me? And he says, I'm not really sure. And I remember him sort of looking me up and down and saying, where did you study and what did you do? And there. But I got the rooms. And they were 10,000 Rand a month, just for this 3x3 space and a shared reception. That was the best thing of all. Because with a shared receptionist, she did all my bookings, and I could run the sessions to the hour. So at one stage, I was doing 11 sessions a day.
Sure.
Start at 6, end at 6, and have a little bit of a break for lunch. And it was just this sausage machine. And that sort of taught me how to time sessions properly. I'm much more relaxed with my sessions nowadays. But those days were, you got to be there on time. If you arrive late, we have a shorter session, because 5 minutes to the hour, I'm saying goodbye, seeing you to the car, the receptionist will take the cash, and I say hello to my next client who was there, into the room, and we start on the hour again. And that's just how it went. And I must say that you can do that for a while, and then you just can't anymore. So then my day sort of shifted a little bit. I would go 6 until maybe 3, see 7 clients, and then I'd maybe do 10 until 6, because the medical practice was open till 6 at night. And one of the conditions were that we had to sort of work within those parameters of the medical thing. Anyway, what was good was that I got a lot of referral from Richard Brink and the other medical practitioners there for what they called the ancillary stuff. And that, quote unquote, is how they labeled it. So the ancillary stuff was, go and see Tommy, he'll help you stop smoking, or go and see Tommy, he'll sort you out with your weight management, all of those kind of things. Then the building went up for sale, and an IT business bought it, and they wanted nothing to do with the medical staff, and so we all terminated leases. And I thought, you know what, for 10,000 Rand a month, I can lose a fair number of clients if they think that they can't travel out to my space. I'm going to consult at Protea Ranch. And that was around it's probably about 12 years ago or so. And that's where I've been ever since. And it's a busy practice. In the weeks that I do hypnotherapy consulting, I now see not 11 a day. I now see about 16 to 20 people a week, 4 a day, 5 days a week. And it works exceptionally well.
Because if you can see that many people a day, you'd burn out very quickly. Hey, it takes a lot out of a person.
No, it does. No, you know what? You learn how to sort of reboot between sessions. It's an old corporate coaching principle of state management. And one has to sort of get into a state of flow, and you can hold that state of flow for 90 minutes at the most. My sessions do not go over that, because I can't drive them over that. I don't have the capacity. So I book my time out in 2-hour slots. In that 2-hour slot, I will go for 90 minutes maximum, and that gives me about a half an hour transition time. I'll just go and meditate a little bit, do some self-hypnosis, walk in the garden, play with the dogs a little bit, get the next client in. With where I live, the downside of that is I can never carefully time when people are going to arrive. So there's always that fuzz half hour in between that I have to have. I find that the Zoom sessions are much more taxing, that 1 hour Zoom session, much more taxing than it is working with people. When you get people, you get into their energy space, Hendrik, and it's lovely. You tune into them. Over Zoom, you're talking to the TV, and you don't get the nuance of body language. You don't get into the energy space. It's less intuitive. There's always the worry about dropping the line or signal strength. Here in South Africa, it's just crazy with signal strength. And there's all of that extra dynamic around it. So one can do some amazing work over Zoom. Don't underestimate what we can do as hypnotherapists over Zoom. But just personally, I find at the end of the day, I'm depleted when during the core of lockdown, all I was ever doing were Zoom sessions. At the end of the day, I just fell into my bed and just snoozed. I was exhausted. Yeah.
Because I found it interesting that there was a comment you made somewhere in one of the WhatsApp groups that the Zoom actually works quite well, and I've been resisting it so much. Today was my first Zoom little meeting with my son. But with the interviews I've been having with everybody, so everybody's saying the Zoom works quite well. There's really no difference in the results that they're getting from it.
No.
And we've been so resistant about that in the past, haven't we?
Yeah, so I find that to make it more effective, there's a lot more client education that needs to take place. Client needs to be in a space where they can be fully relaxed. If they're lying down on the bed and they got their laptop perched on their tummy, then the laptops, as they're breathing, you sort of, the picture's like being on the ocean, and it's not so nice, and you're looking straight up their nostrils, and that's just awful. They need to be hands-free, because if they've got their cell phone, you can't put them in trance, because then the cell phone drops into their lap and you get the view of the floor. So there's a whole little thing that one needs to do in order to educate the client so that you get the best view of them, so you can watch and monitor them. You need to look for all of those signs of trance. You need to be able to estimate trance depth. And up front, part of the education is not only to get the room environment all sorted for them, but it's also how to, that's the easy part, how to give them suggestions that if the line drops, how they just, go into a nice deep prolonged sleep and wake up normally and naturally. I mean, that's easily enough done. Yeah, I've done remarkable work, and now what I'm finding is that the clients themselves are forming a trend that I never expected. They come and see me for the heavy lifting, and then they use Zoom in order to do the light top-ups, and that's just magnificent.
Yeah.
And then when I'm with them to do the heavy lifting, when we're doing the in-person sessions, that's when I do a lot of the priming for reinduction, using hypnotic cues.
First hypnotic suggestions.
Exactly.
Like next time you'll just
when I just wave at you or something, then just cheers. And if they're in a nice, comfortable sofa, I prefer them sitting up and rather than lying down. And in that space, we then have all the magic keywords for me to induce the trance and bring them out of trance. And I do a lot of short burst trance work with a little bit of out of trance reframing, just contextualizing. So the Zoom sessions are more in and out and in and out. It sort of bases itself more on conversational style hypnosis. So there's watching those moments when people open up themselves, and you just see those moments of receptivity, because there's a conversational moment when you can get to them and say something that's transformative. And I can gauge that, and I can have this quasi-conversation with them that is half trance, sometimes deep trance, sometimes fully trance in those Zoom sessions, whereas the in-person sessions are more traditional sessions with a little bit of top and tail conversation with the core trance work.
But that's also where you can do the solid rapport building, so that when you do the Zoom sessions, that's already there. You don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, we're buddies by now. Yeah.
So you were mentioning conversational hypnosis, and I remember one day you caught me very unawares because before I knew it, I was looking far into weird spaces. How does one learn how to use that skill? Where is it taught? I've not really seen like expert. Let's do conversational hypnosis and how do you use that? You can't just obviously hypnotize somebody without them giving their permission to do that.
Yeah. Well, remember the hypnotic formula, my version of it, which is sort of a cobbled version. I've seen other versions of hypnosis. It's a formula like E equals MC squared. H equals R, and R stands for rapport. If you can't get rapport, you can't get any further. Plus C, which is consent, Now, remember that consent is not, may I hypnotize you? Yes, Hendrik, you may, and then you're away. It's not about verbal consent. It's not about permission. It's about overcoming fear. It's about subconscious permission. It's about, do my belief systems give you consent? Let's say I've got some religious reason why I feel as though I'm breaking every rule in the book and defying my minister by coming and having hypnosis done on me. And if I can't get beyond that, I can't give you the C part, the consent part. So rapport building is good, but that consent is a lot deeper than that. Then there is induction or indirection, let's say. And indirection is all about how do you get the critical faculty offline, how do you get into the subconscious to plant some suggestions, and then in order to sustain the trance for a longer period, for as long as you need it in that therapy session, you need what in my formula is just known as ST, selective thinking. And that's the lock-in. How do you get the trance induced? And then how do you lock the person in place? So it's really those four ingredients. And there's a play on all of that. Now, in the in-person session, you can watch body language very carefully, and you can soon see if there's reservation, if you're establishing rapport. All of those NLP techniques of matching and pacing and all of that work fantastically for that. And very quickly you can get rapport established. You can soon see by asking a couple of pertinent questions as to whether this person is going to allow themselves to be hypnotized or not. And then it's technique. Then it's just what we've been taught to do the induction and to lock that trance in place. In a conversational sense, one has to do all of those things. So you establish rapport, you establish trust, you get the consent. But when you get to the induction part, it's not formal. It's an informal induction. And that induction, one usually doesn't often lock it into the selective thinking part. The induction happens just very quickly. And if you think of the word induction, and you split it into two subcomponents, it's to duct inwardly. It's to bring the mind out of the external world and to focus it onto the internal world. And the moment I use a key word like imagine an apple. Now where we're sitting there isn't an apple that I know of anywhere around us. The moment I say imagine an apple, you can't find that object in the outside world, so instantly you have gone inwardly in order to try and imagine it. The moment you've gone inwardly, I have an opportunity to plant a subsequent suggestion next to that one, because in that little fraction of a second, you are in trance. It's not a sustainable trance, but you're focused inwardly. And because you're focused inwardly, hunting internally for that I've asked you to find, your critical faculty is similarly just momentarily bypassed. So what I say next goes into that space. And we know one of those rules of the mind, the 8 rules of the mind. Every suggestion acted upon creates less opposition to successive suggestions. And then one starts to apply the suggestions into that space in a conversational way. And then without locking it in with selective thinking, if I just stop for a moment, the person will process that. You can see that they're entranced, and they will process that for a bit, and then they'll come back into their logical mind, and then they'll start to converse about something else, and then we have about some other questions, and then grab them back and yank them back under the water again. It's like having to hold your breath underwater. Yeah? And these are sort of coming up for little gasps of air in that conversational metaphor in a way, you know. So let me just backtrack a little, if I may. The same hypnotic formula then works in that Zoom space, but here in that Zoom space, you don't have the luxury of being able to see the whole body language and it's hard to establish from the beginning a rapport. So where do you establish rapport? You have to rely on your website and the other communication mechanisms that got you in there. Trust is established because it's a word-of-mouth referral. Trust is established because you have convinced the people that you're the right kind of person. A lot of conviction has taken place for them to actually do the booking. And I find there's much more reliance on good design, coherence between your website, your communications. Somewhere on your website is a good idea. I don't have it on mine. other than my podcasts, is to allow people to hear the tone of your voice, to establish a connection with you as a person, with some video material, your voice somewhere that they can access. You don't want to. I don't like American websites because it's in-your-face stuff. I like the more British way of more persuasive, more a softer approach. But all of that then leads into that Zoom session. And then remember, once you have a Zoom session, if your client goes and moves to Cape Town and you're living in Joburg, by and large, they trust you. And you don't lose your client because your client relocates. And they start talking to people. So I've never had it before in all the 18 years that I've been doing hypnosis. I now have a well-established client base in the UK, Dubai, little bit in Europe, 5 people in Europe, Port Elizabeth, because those are underserviced areas, Port Elizabeth, East London, and Cape Town, because there's certain people in Cape Town that just want to talk to me. I've never had that ability before. So yay for Zoom.
That's incredible. Because, I mean, if you look at the Find a Hypnotist website and you click on Free State, there's nobody there. If you click on, I don't even think there is a Northern Cape listed in the directory, and I might want to do that. But, I mean, there's a lot of people that don't have access to the kind of services that we provide. It's only in the big cities, really, and in one or two of the bigger towns of the country. So Zoom has certainly opened up hypnosis to a much wider client base.
Remember, of course, that the Free State is going to be a group of people who are averse to hypnosis. Hypnosis works well in the big cities because everyone's used to it. What one needs to do is one needs to do road shows down into places like Bloemfontein. And in my mind, that's where the Hypnosis Guild comes in. We go and do something there, and we present it, and we establish that, and we establish, we showcase the practitioners and establish a presence, and then say, well, if there isn't a therapist in your area, these are the people. Now you establish some rapport and do some showcasing of what we do. These are the people that you can meet, and you can meet them over Zoom for now until somebody establishes themselves in that space.
Because now, talk to me about the guild. So far, it's been the hypnosis schools that have been kind of driving the community.
Yes.
And there's been no kind of overall overarching body that's got everybody in their fold. Every school has their own kind of little niche. You've been driving the guild for some time now, and as you say, it could play quite a big role in promoting hypnosis. But so far, it's a little bit small, a little bit Pretoria-based, isn't it, or Gauteng-based?
Up until Yvonne's cancer, when Yvonne got cancer, that sort of just put the guild on the back burner for a little bit, because all our attention was just focused on her recovery, which, as everyone knows, she's recovered very well. The guild, there's a need for the guild, but there's a suspicion for the guild. Now, if I were to run a hypnosis training institute in South Africa, I'm running a business, and I have to run it with good business principles. So what is the outcome for a business? Profitability. So you have to do everything that you can in order to make this profitable. You're not running a charity. And so therefore you have to find your customers, you have to hold on to your market sector, and you have to make sure that you get annuity revenue back from those clients, in this case students, and you lock them in through things like CPE points and registration and
listing on the website.
All of those things. That's how you do it. That's what the business does. So I can understand the business's suspicion when something like the guild comes along and says, we're going to run get-togethers showcasing hypnosis. If I was a business owner, I'd also say, I'm not so sure that I like this model, because what dent is it going to cause in my business itself? Are people going to gravitate to the guild and give their allegiance to the guild and sign membership with the guild and get a certificate from the guild that it gives them credential to practice? And there's a big risk in that. So what the guild has to do is that guild has to come along, and the guild has to say it is non-profitable, that it is simply an association that is non-affiliated, where one can cross-pollinate ideas. And how does one do that? Does one do that via meetings, which in the past, prior to COVID, was probably the only way that we could viably do it? And so twice a year we ran meetings in Joburg, Pretoria, Durban, and Cape Town. And those attracted anything from about 25 to 35 people at a time. Low budget stuff, $350, lunch thrown in, venue costs covered by that. There was a little bit of a cost on our part because we had to pay our airfares. Very seldom did we recoup the cost, but it could work. It was a bit of cross-subsidization because we used our own venue at Protea Ranch. We were able to take the capital from that and offset it against the airfares in Durban and the transport to Durban and the accommodation, and the same in Cape Town. Once every 2 years, we ran the guild up in Harare, and that was a lifeblood for Harare. It was the only hypnotherapy interaction the hypnotherapists had up there. Then along came Yvonne's illness. No sooner did we want to get it re-established, along came COVID, and now the idea of the guild needs to be reshaped. The original intent was never to hook it to me, because A, I don't want it to be an ego thing. B, it should run independently, and if I get run over like with a proverbial bus, like Yvonne got cancer, that's unfair for the guild, because then if it's linked to a personality, to a person, when that person's indisposed, the guild is indisposed. The idea has always been for the guild to be run by an independent executive, chairperson, deputy chairperson, treasurer, secretary, co-opted members for whatever purpose. That executive of 4 should then run the guild, promote the guild, and find ways of bringing hypnotherapists, no matter where you are, no matter how you've trained, and even interested parties into the fold. So that's where the idea of Find a Hypnotherapist came from. It was Leo Gopal in those days, who was part of the guild, thought this is a cool idea. We can just create a referral thing, so members of the guild can also be listed in some way. This has now just been split off, and I'm glad so, because it would have failed under the guild, because the guild had a little bit of a hiccup. But in the foreseeable future, the guild needs to be re-established as that independent body. Now, I know that there was a big argy-bargy at the time when we tried to establish that. There were some misunderstandings, and there were some egos at play, and the guild kind of started with sort of a semi-formal executive, and it quickly collapsed into one big bun fight. It's amazing that it survived that. But it took a little bit of rescuing, and we pulled it back into what it is today. So yeah, that's the future for the guild, and I think it has a really important role in the long term in South Africa, even in terms of lobbying to government.
For sure.
So just touching back on that executive and membership for the guild, the original blueprint, and it was something I did in Microsoft Visio, this big A0 piece of paper with how it all fits together. I must actually dig that out and dust it off again, because I think it's relevant nowadays. We understood that there were tiers of membership. So there were interested people who were just armchair hypnotherapists, or hypnotists, let's say. Just a curiosity value. There were those who are in the world of theatrics. There are those who are in the world of clinical work. They're corporate coaches that use this. There are professional psychotherapists as medical practitioners who use it. And there might be tiers of different membership, including schools as members of the guild. And I was hoping that the schools would have representatives on the executives, not so much the people, but let's say there were 2 school representatives on the executive and 2 ordinary hypnotherapists as just practitioners on that executive. That would have given a nice balance, and would have made sure that the guild never stood on the toes of anybody. The guild will never practice hypnosis because that would step into someone's business space, and it will never ever run a school. It may create a venue for cross-pollination of ideas. That's different. But it'll never run a formal school, and it will never, ever, ever stand as competitors to its own members.
Because the one idea, I think we spoke about this some years ago, is we need like a symposium or a conference or some sort of bigger event where we can draw all these people. As you say, like there are psychologists who practice this we don't know about. There are people in their back rooms. There are people that are just interested. When we had Roy Hunter here, that was the only time that I really saw a room full of people really interested and coming together. And I think the guild certainly would be instrumental in pulling an event like that together, don't you think?
Very much so. Very, very much so. And imagine if the schools at an event like that can showcase their businesses by having stalls or whatever it is, say in the foyer of the venue, and canvas for new students, and that we can allow the public to wander through, and that there's the whole expose, if you like, of what hypnosis is in its different forms.
And also the stage hypnotists. I mean, they have such a bad reputation amongst the working hypnotherapists. I was speaking to Max Kahn the other day. He was going, people blame us for all these things, and you can actually learn quite a bit from being a stage hypnotist. So how do we promote, apart from the guild, how do we promote hypnotherapy as a valid method of helping people solve real deep problems?
I think we've done a very poor job at that, but I think hypnosis itself has kicked us in the bum, and it has done remarkable things for our clients, and they are the ones that have promoted it through word of mouth. Because 2002, when I was first introduced to hypnosis, there were very few practitioners around, and they were seen as voodoo people, weird wackos. Nowadays, look how many hypnotherapists there are.
Well, surprisingly, not that many. I've been counting 54.
Yeah, so you're not picking those that are in that medical world.
Yeah.
But then remember also, as a psychologist, you would have been to a university, but in university your hypnotherapy training is just like a day or so of an introduction to this. I spoke to
somebody this morning who studied psychology, said it was just skimmed on. You know it exists, but you don't know how to do it. You had to go to a school to actually learn how to do it.
And it's only there because of Freud, really,
Yeah.
And Freud tried it, found that suggestion was not sustainable over a long period, and then gave up on it and went the other route, Had he found out ways to make suggestion stick.
He was just a poor hypnotist, that's all.
May I add one thing?
Sure.
I am a maverick in my practice. I don't follow the traditional rules much at all. There is a person who has deeply, deeply, deeply inspired me. And her name is Clarissa Pinkola Estes. She, if you go and Google her, she's a Spanish lady, Dr. Clarissa Pinkola Estes. And she is the custodian of stories, ancient stories that were told by people before people could even write and record these things down, and the power of those stories. And I'm deeply, deeply, deeply inspired by stories that are told in South African culture, and the power of those stories and how metaphoric they are. And so a long while ago, I thought, how do I focus the practice on storytelling? And sometime back, 2011, 2013, IMDHA ran 2 script writing competitions, and I presented 2 of my stories at that time, and those stories won me first prize on both of those competitions. But they were both focused around storytelling and how one can use storytelling in the most powerful of ways. These are story frameworks that get adapted to the person, and they bring in elements of the person's world and their life, and by the time you come to the end of the story, people remember the story. Let me give you an example of a story we all remember. The Ugly Duckling. The Ugly Duckling is not about some little swan that grew up, whose mother deposited an egg in a duck's nest. No, it's not about that. The story is about people who are different. Let's say LGBTQI people. They're the ugly ducklings. They don't fit into society. This is about how they go and they talk to all the farmyard animals, and they try to get an understanding, a grasp of who they are. And then in desperation, they go to the pond on the bottom of the farmyard, and they plonk themselves there, and they're in a state of despair. They think they're the only person on this planet who's like them. And then guess what? The swans come on their migratory path overhead, and there's this resonant call. There's a call of kindred spirit, and they find that there's a place to belong, and then they find their place in the world. And how that story of the ugly duckling, how the swans came down and embraced this being and show this being that there's a place. And what do we need in the world is belonging and to be liked, the two key ingredients of all. And then how they fetched the swan and took the swan with them, and how magical that was. That's just an ordinary story, fairy tale that we tell to our children. How can we pump that up and embrace these stories? So please, whatever you do, whoever's listening to this, the starting point is Clarissa's work. There's some of it on YouTube and other podcast places, and she's got some audible books that I don't want to necessarily promote her, but she's a great source of inspiration. And then I urge you to bring those stories in, and that creates a new add-on, a new clip-on to Milton Erickson's work and the kind of stuff that you see in the mentalists' work with conversational hypnosis, and bringing this into the clinical space. Magical, magical, magical. Transform the space in orders of magnitude. Promise you.
Well, I found chatting to my hypnosis colleague very interesting and insightful, and I trust that you did too. Their contact details are in the podcast description, or you can get in touch with them through findahypnotist.co.za. If you want to find out more about me and what I do, please visit my website, hendrikbaird.com. Remember, I release new episodes every Thursday, so be sure to subscribe to my channel. Until we speak again, have a hypnotic day.
Hypnosis works, transforming the mind.